Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Great. So today we're looking at Donald Trump's interview on, well, the Joe Rogan Experience.
Yeah, I listened to this whole thing the other day, and
Yeah.
it's really something.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's making waves, right? Like
Yeah,
everybody's talking about it.
definitely it is.
So we figured, let's unpack it, right? What's really interesting here, and what does it mean for, well, for all of
Well,
us?
to start, it's just kind of a surprising pair,
Like,
right?
yeah, because Rogan has called Trump, an existential threat to democracy
What?
before.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
like, what happened?
Yeah, Rogan actually kind of addressed it.
Did he?
Yeah, he told Trump, once they shot you, I was like, he's got to come in here.
Mm.
It's all about timing.
Once they shot you. So he's talking about the assassination attempt.
Exactly, the one in Pennsylvania. Seems like that, I guess, that shifted his perspective.
Huh. So, is this just timing? Or is there something more strategic going on here?
Well, I think, we have to ask, is this a move by Trump to try and reach younger voters?
Reach out to Rogan's audience.
Yeah, the kind of maybe libertarian-leaning folks who listen to Rogan. I mean, we know Trump's campaign trying to get those younger voters, right?
For sure, yeah. Okay, so let's get into some specifics. Rogan went right into some pretty controversial stuff. Like he actually asked Trump about the 2020 election.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, he said, I want to talk about 2020 because you said over and over again that you were robbed in 2020.
Okay, yeah.
How do you think you were robbed?
Uh-huh.
Everybody always cuts you off.
Yeah.
Like he straight up set him up to talk about it.
Wow.
Like,
And I bet Trump took that opportunity and ran with it.
oh, absolutely. He said the judges didn't have what it took to turn over an election.
Yeah.
And then he repeated those claims about, mail-in ballots and Democrats using COVID to cheat.
It's important to point out, of course, that a lot of those claims have been debunked.
Yeah, for sure. But they're still out there. And what's interesting is Rogan kind of seemed to agree with some of it. He compared questioning the election to questioning COVID vaccines.
Did he really?
Yeah, he said you get labeled an election denier.
Uh-huh.
It's like being labeled an anti-vaxxer if you question some of the health consequences that people have from the COVID-19 shots.
I mean, that's a loaded comparison, isn't it?
Right.
Considering, Rogan's had his own issues with spreading misinformation about COVID.
Oh, yeah, that whole thing with Neil Young and Joni Mitchell pulling their music from Spotify.
Exactly. So now you've got Rogan, who's been criticized for that, seemingly aligning himself with Trump's election claims.
And that has to have some kind of effect on all the distrust that's already out there.
Definitely. I mean, think about those people who already feel, disenfranchised, skeptical of institutions and official narratives.
Yeah.
By giving Trump a platform to repeat those claims and even comparing it to, vaccine skepticism, Rogan might be even unintentionally reinforcing those beliefs for his listener.
Okay, so from election denial, we jump to something that might actually affect your wallet.
Yeah.
Taxes.
Taxes.
Yeah, Trump suggested we get rid of the federal income tax.
Wait, what?
Like completely eliminate it.
No way.
Yeah. Rogan asked him about it, and Trump just said, yeah, sure, but why not?
He just threw it out there like that.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
He even brought up President McKinley and his tariff policies.
Yeah.
Like, he admires that approach.
Wow, okay, so eliminating the income tax, I mean, that's huge EE.
Right. Talk about a radical change.
Yeah, it has roots in, supply-side economics. Proponents, like those who admire McKinley's protectionist stuff, they'd argue it would, boost the economy, leave more money for businesses to invest.
Wouldn't that also blow up the deficit?
Oh, absolutely. Critics would be worried about that for sure. And, about making income inequality worse.
Because the wealthy would benefit the most.
Yeah, potentially. So it's a really big shift, in how the government would be funded.
And the implications are way bigger than just our individual taxes, right?
Exactly. We're talking about who really benefits, who might end up carrying the burden.
Yeah.
It's a lot to unpack.
From economic policy, we jump to, well, outer space.
Outer space?
Yeah, they talked about aliens.
Wait, really?
Well, kind of. More like the possibility of life on other planets.
Okay.
Trump started out skeptical, saying he's never been a believer, but then he starts talking about these solid jet pilots who've seen very strange things in the sky.
So a little X-Files action.
Right. And then, he says, there's no reason not to think that Mars and all these planets don't have life.
Huh. But didn't we, send probes and rovers to Mars, and they haven't found anything?
Exactly. Rogan actually pointed that out.
Oh, he did?
Yeah. But Trump said, maybe it's life that we don't know about.
Okay. So still holding on to that possibility.
And it ties into his campaign promise about sending an American astronaut to Mars.
Right, right. So it's like this theme keeps coming up, right? This skepticism of things that are widely accepted, scientific facts.
And speaking of skepticism, we got to talk about Trump and polls. He really doesn't trust them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He says there's probably a lot of fraud in how they're done.
Wow. But doesn't he sometimes mention polls that make him look good?
Oh, definitely. If they say he's doing well, he'll bring them up.
Uh.
But otherwise, he basically says they're bogus.
So is this a real concern about how polls work? Or just a way to discredit the ones he doesn't like?
That's the question, right? I mean, polls are complicated. The way they're done, the margin of error, the sampling, it all matters.
But if he just dismisses them outright, especially the ones that show him losing, it might make his supporters doubt the whole system, right?
Potentially, yeah. It kind of fits with his, tendency to reject anything that doesn't fit his view. But hey, on a lighter note, it did seem like he and Rogan actually enjoyed hanging out.
Oh, yeah. They got along.
Yeah, Rogan even said Trump has comedic timing that is very good. You understand stand-up comedy.
Huh. High praise coming from Rogan.
Right. And they both love UFC, so they talked about that.
That's interesting. So on the surface, you've got this friendly vibe between two guys who've, disagreed publicly before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So are those shared interests just surface level? Or could this point to some kind of shift in political alliances?
We'll have to keep digging to find out.
Exactly. We've got a lot more to cover in this deep dive. Okay, so we're back and still diving deep into that Trump interview on Rogan.
Right. Where we left off, it was election denial, a wild tax idea.
And even aliens. But let's get back to that whole friendly vibe between those two. Because remember, Rogan's been pretty critical of Trump before.
Yeah, so it's like, is this just two personalities clicking, or is there something more calculated happening?
Well, Rogan did compliment Trump's comedic timing. He even said, "You have comedic timing that is very good. You understand stand-up comedy."
Okay, so maybe a genuine connection there. But also, Rogan does have all sorts of guests on his show, even people he disagrees with, right?
That's true. So is this just Rogan being Rogan? Open to dialogue, all that? Or is it Trump trying to use Rogan's platform to reach those younger voters, the ones who maybe don't follow traditional news?
Could be both, right? Trump gets access to an audience he might not normally reach in a casual setting. And Rogan, well, he gets the buzz of having a huge e-guest.
So everyone wins. But what about Rogan's listeners, the ones who might be swayed by this? An endorsement from Rogan, even if it's not direct, has to carry some weight, right?
Absolutely. This is why the interview matters, It goes beyond just two guys talking. It could actually affect the political landscape.
Wow, okay. Makes you think about, how media, politics, influence, it's all tangled up. But let's circle back to that tax thing, the no more income tax idea.
Right. On the surface, it sounds amazing, right? No more federal income tax. Sign me up.
I know, but is it too good to be true?
Probably. I got to think about what would happen. If the government loses that much money, cuts to services like education, healthcare.
And the national debt, it's already huge, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't this make it even worse?
Totally. So is this a good idea economically or a disaster waiting to happen? We got to look at both sides.
Okay, so what do you people say? What are the arguments for getting rid of income tax?
Well, those in favor say it would boost the economy. More money for people and businesses means more investment, jobs, growth, basically.
But has that actually happened when similar policies were tried?
Good question. It's debatable, really. Some economists say it could cause inflation or even illness government revenue overall, so hurting the economy in the long run.
And then there's the fairness issue. Would this just make rich people richer?
Critics say yes, it would worsen income inequality, the wealthy paying even less proportionally while everyone else picks up the slack. So it's not just about the money, but the social impact too.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. And Trump hasn't really said how he'd replace the lost money or what it would mean for government programs.
Exactly. Lots of questions, not many answers yet. But it does get us talking about, the role of government, wealth distribution, economic policy in general.
Okay, so from economics, let's go back to those polls. Trump's skepticism, it's kind of a pattern with him, right?
Yeah, if a poll's good for him, he loves it. If not, it's rigged, fake, whatever. He even said, I don't think they interview, in many cases, the pollsters aren't even doing their jobs.
It's a pretty serious accusation. Does he not understand how polls work? They use interviews, surveys, statistics. It's a whole process.
It's not perfect, no.
Yeah.
But polls are meant to give us a snapshot of what people think. If he keeps saying they're all lies, well, that makes people distrust the whole system.
And that's dangerous, right? erodes trust in institutions, makes it harder to even have a conversation about important things.
Definitely. It's a worrying trend. But hey, let's not get too gloomy. Even with their disagreements, Trump and Rogan did deconnect on some level, right?
They did. Laughed together, talked about UFC, even bonded over comedy.
It shows you, even in politics, where things are so divided, people can still find common ground.
Right, a little bit of hope in a world that feels pretty polarized right now.
Exactly. But speaking of polarized views, let's move on to something they did declash on: the environment.
And we're back. So we've talked about a lot with this Trump-Rogan interview, but there's one more big thing we got to get to: the environment.
Yeah, this is where things got a little less friendly. Rogan really pushed Trump on, the impact of oil and gas production. He said straight up, but there are legitimate concerns about environmental impact, correct? Even brought up some, specific environmental disasters.
It was a different vibe than, like, the jokes in UFC talk.
Mm.
Trump at first kind of dodged it, saying those environmental rules are just about making consultants rich.
But Rogan kept at it, He was like, you want to mitigate that as much as possible,
Yeah.
emphasizing that we got to minimize the damage.
You could tell they disagreed, even though they were trying to be polite about it. Trump eventually said, sure. But then he went right back to his usual stuff about clean water, clean air, China, and his problems with California.
It felt like they could have had a deeper conversation there, Instead of just, talking points and partisan stuff. It's more complicated than that.
Yeah, like how do we balance needing energy with protecting the planet? That's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's not just about picking a side.
Exactly. And climate change is a huge example of that, right? We oversimplify it, fall back on those talking points instead of actually, debating it properly.
So how do we get past that?
Mm.
How do we have better conversations about the environment?
I think we got to start by admitting it's complicated. Listen to different views, look at the science, be willing to compromise, find that middle ground, work together to make things sustainable.
Well said. So as we wrap up this whole deep dive into the Trump-Rogan thing, what have we learned? Election denial, wild tax idea, aliens, polls, the environment. It's been quite the ride.
It really gives you a look into, how Trump sees the world and how that comes across on a show like Rogan's, which has a ton of influence.
Exactly. And it makes you think, right, what's our responsibility as, just regular people? How do we sort through all this information? How do we talk to each other about these tough topics?
That's the big takeaway, I think. Think critically, folks. Don't just believe everything you hear. Question things. Look for different viewpoints. Have those conversations respectfully, even with people you disagree with.
The world's a complicated place, no easy answers. But if we talk to each other, listen, try to find common ground, well, maybe we can make things better.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and keep the conversation going. Until next time.